Well, next, the third example is a man called Timothy, who followed Paul. It's in the New Testament now. This is the master that found apprentice. Do you remember the first one, Joshua? It was apprentice found the master. Second one, God gave master the apprentice. And this one, the master found apprentice. Well, in Acts 16, you can read about the Timothy. And Timothy joined Paul's second missionary journey, actually. And Acts 16 tells us that Timothy was from a place called Lystra, which is in Galatia, which is modern-day Turkey, around that area. You see, and actually Timothy is coming from the family of faith. You see, his mother and his grandmother, they were converted from Jewish beliefs into Christianity. Actually, Timothy's father is Greek, the mother is Jews, you see. So, the family is very much walking close to God, and Timothy was born into that. And he had a very good reputation, Bible tells us, among the families and friends and neighborhood. He's a good boy, you see. So, and that's where Paul found Timothy. The most likely, the mother, Lois, and the grandmother, the Eunice, were the kind of disciple of Paul in a way. I think that they heard Paul's preaching and teaching, and then maybe they are part of that groups. And that's why they came to know the Lord. And naturally, Timothy became the believers. Well, so that kind of close connection with Paul there. So, when Timothy grew up, Paul decided to take him along with his missionary journey to disciple and mentor him. And Timothy became Paul's disciple, the ministry partner, and then spiritual son. You know, you can read that those stories in 1 Corinthians 4 and Philippians 2, that Paul was sending Timothy, trust Timothy, and sending him to all those churches to do the work on behalf of Paul, see? And eventually Timothy was put in charge to lead the church in Ephesus. You can read that in 1 and 2 Timothy. And interesting, this 1 and 2 Timothy, or Americans it says 1st and 2nd letters of Timothy. Those letters that Paul wrote to Timothy contained about 3 aspects. The first one is about the detailed instruction of how to run the church. See, way to worship, etc., etc. And the second aspect is about apostolic leadership. You know, dealing with false prophets and the deacons and all those people. And thirdly, he wrote the personal encouragement to Timothy. You know, it's about his health and about his timidity and etc., etc. He wrote in this letter to Timothy to encourage him, to strengthen him. And that's how he went. So Timothy, mentored by this great apostle Paul, as a disciple, the ministry partner, and became a spiritual son. Interesting, according to the manuscript in the early churches, that Timothy died as a martyr in Ephesus by the pagan mobs while he was preaching Christ in the midst of pagan festivals. Actually, it says the year 997 AD, and he was about 80 years old. You see, he never compromised. He had the same zeal and the passion for Christ and the gospel as his spiritual father, that mentor, the master that Paul had. You see, actually, in his letter, Paul said, imitate me in the walk with God, you see. And that's what Timothy did. See, Paul found a young apprentice, that's next generation. I think he was looking, you know, and this Timothy, I think he's the one. And I believe Holy Spirit told Paul as well to mentor him. So Paul find apprentice, young apprentice, the next generation, to pass on his mantle, the gifting, the ministry, because he knew this work will continue after he's gone. You know, there's an interesting story there I heard. The man called John Paul Jackson, who passed away a few years ago. He's American, the prophet. And one of his story he was telling was, you know, he had this gift of interpreting the visions and the dreams, the prophetic, and he was such a gift of a prophecy, prophetic and revelation. And as his gift was developing and his ministry was getting much more famous, more popular and well known. That's well known, and God is bringing him into the center stage, the front stage of what's going on, and a lot of people became knowing him. You know, like he became famous. Anyway, as he was doing one of the conference or meeting, this old guy, I can't remember his name, like it was quite a well-known guy. He came up to John Paul Jackson and he said, well, you know, you got a great ministry, great gifting, and God is using mightily. Have you got anybody to pass on this gifting? Are you teaching anybody or are you mentoring anybody? And John Paul said, no, I haven't. No, you know, I'm not mentoring anybody, I'm not teaching anybody. And this old guy said, well, it's shame. And John Paul said, why is that shame? Well, if you haven't got someone to pass on your gift, it means this gift will die with you. As you die, this gift die with you. And John Paul said, that's right. Since then, he started the school, started the ministry of discipling about this prophetic gifting that he had. And that ministry became big, and God used this ministry, that his students mightily, and then many of them are still in the ministry doing a great work for the kingdom, you see. And this is the same. The Paul, gifted apostle, the evangelist and teacher, the apostle, this gifting needed to pass on to the next generation, otherwise that gift would have died with Paul died. So he found Timothy, and I bet many others, Luke's one, and some other guys, Silas, and he passed on his ministries and gifting to those next generations. You see, it is important. If you are in a ministry doing a great work for the kingdom, find someone to pass on your gifting and this ministry. Mentor them and disciple them. Otherwise, your ministry and gifting will die with you. And God doesn't want that. God said in the Genesis, multiply, be fruitful and multiply. It means pass on your DNA of your gifting in the ministry. See, Timothy, while he was discipled and mentored, he also served Paul. You know, he imitated and inherited Paul's way of walk with God. And their relationship did not end there. The Paul supported him till the end, you see. When Timothy was in his own ministry in Ephesus, Paul continued, mentored him, supported him, encouraged him through letters and etc. You see, Paul was faithful in his responsibility of choosing Timothy as his successor. And that's what you have to do if you're mentoring someone. If that person goes away into his or her own ministry, do not leave them there. Keep encouraging them. Keep in contact, keep in touch, keep encouraging them, contact them, teach them, mentor them, watch over them. You know, that's very important. And also, it was more than master and apprentice relationship. It became father and son relationship. So, what is your relationship with when you are discipling? What is your relationship with your master? Well, we can have a look at in this. You can have a look at in Timothy and Paul relationship, and we can learn a lot more. Well, so those are the three examples. You can find many more examples in the Bible of a master and apprentice relationships. But those three slightly different types of discipleship going on. Well, apprentice find a master, and God gave a master the apprentice. The master find the apprentice. Seemingly different patterns, but there are a lot of similarities in there. See, the similarities are such as that they all had love for God. Those disciples, apprentice, they all had love for God, heart for God. And those apprentices, disciples, they all had servant heart. And they all had respect for the masters. And those masters, they all had love for the apprentices. The love, that's important. They are not just your tool or trophies. They are people God has given you to make them grow, the nurture. And with that, you need a love for them. And also, it became more than a master and the apprentice relationship. They all became like father and son, the brothers, much more than teacher and student relationship. And apprentices' works were built on the master's works. It will go beyond what you are doing by who you are discipling to. See, as I mentioned, God designed us to walk with others, not alone. So those people who think, well, just me and God, I don't need a church. Well, think again. You might be walking with God, all right, but your gifting, your ministry, what you have might be so beneficial or much needed for other people. And that's what the discipleship is all about. So, for those who are mature in Christianity, those who are already in a ministry, been a Christian for a long time, find someone to disciple and mentor like Paul. And listen to God who brings someone to mentor like Elijah. And be a role model by your actions every day for those people around you, like Moses. See, as I said, the Lone Ranger is not what God planned for. And the next generation, you have to remember, they do not grow naturally. They need to be nurtured. They need to be mentored. They need to be discipled. And they need someone to help them grow, guide, and teach, and sometimes be firm. You see, God chastises those He loves. We all have to have you all have to have that same attitude. And their part of kingdom work will be built on the current kingdom work. You remember that. Help them to do more than you do in the future. And for those who are young in Christians, find someone to look up to learn from those people around you, like Joshua. Find a role model. And then find your master to be mentored by. You seek around, ask them to teach you, like Elisha and Timothy. And important thing, serve them. And in and out of the church while you are learning, being mentored. Everything you experience in serving will be added to your ministry in the future. Nothing will be wasted. And in the right time comes, God will launch you into the ministry and into your dreams. So, discipleship, very important. One other thing at the end. Well, Goichi, how about Jesus and his disciples? Well, I deliberately did not mention Jesus and his disciples because I want you to study it. You see, all those examples I brought up, actually you can find in a relationship, that's discipleship of Jesus to his disciples. Master and apprentice are in it. So, please read the book of Gospel, Acts, and find out how Jesus discipled his disciples. The one thing Jesus mentioned regarding the discipleship, he said, love one another as I have loved you, so that world may know you are my disciples. John 13. And this is a command from the Lord Jesus Christ. He said, I give you a new command. And he said this. See, discipling is not just about teaching someone or mentoring someone or to replicate ministry. It's not only that. That's much more than that. That's why Jesus said, love each other. See, it is to help each other to grow in love. See, love for God and love for each other. To walk on a path that God has given to each one of us. And it is to be one with Christ. And that's what Jesus is telling us. It's about the discipleship. And this will fulfill all the ministries and the purpose, you see. The great commandments that love the Lord your God and love each other. And discipleship's true purpose, the end product, is about that. So, master and apprentice, it's the way of God. Find someone to mentor. Find someone to be mentored for. So, discipleship. We don't walk alone. Master and apprentice is a way of God. Be blessed. Goodbye.